Hey, this is Venus Monique with Personal Powerhouse, where Christian women build their acting careers with integrity. So, on that note, today, one of the things we're going to discuss is how to set your boundaries and make them known. So, I'm sure you have heard the phrase that either you have to be willing to do anything and everything to make it in the film industry, or you have to sell your soul to the devil, or whatever people say. But truly, you can have boundaries and you can do this career with integrity and with your values in place. It's just a matter of figuring out what those are and then also letting other people know what they are. So, one of the things that I often say when people say, "Hey, what advice do you have for someone who's just getting into acting?" I pretty much always say, know your boundaries and make them known. Because if you don't know what your boundaries are before you get into this industry, it is very easy to compromise. That paycheck can look really good when you're short on money and they want you to do this kind of scene that you're not up for, or this opportunity could arise. And because you want it so badly, you're willing to compromise what you know you shouldn't in order to get that opportunity that you feel like won't come around again. So, having boundaries is really big to me. And so I want to discuss some things with you. So, what are boundaries? They're basically the rules that you live by. There is a proper definition out there somewhere, but they're basically the rules that you live by that make you feel like you are holding on to what you value. So why do you need them? Well, we just talked about that. They help you ground yourself or kind of solidify your thinking before the temptations come in, the temptation of money, of fame, of opportunity, of all of these things. But if you've not sat down and figured out what they are, then it's easy to be in the midst of something and be like, yeah, I'll do it. But really, if you had your boundaries written down, you would know, like, I've already thought about this before I was ever tempted by anything, and that's not for me. Like, that's just not who I am. And our boundaries are going to be different. Like, God made us all differently. We have different desires. He's got us working in the industry differently. So, what my boundaries are may not be your boundaries, and that's A-OK. Totally fine. So when did I make mine? I actually made mine the day that I knew I was going to do acting. And I knew I was going to do acting when God flat out told me to, because I tried acting in high school. Um, I like found an ad in the back of the paper that was for acting and modeling. And I thought, well, I'll go for modeling at the time. I thought that was what I wanted to do. But when I went to the open call that they had, they were like, well, you're too short for modeling, but why don't you try acting? And I was like, I don't know that I'm interested in it, but sure, why not? So I did that, and I did acting for a year, and I went to LA for a workshop, and I did classes with my agency, which I later found out was a scam agency. But, through that process, I realized, I don't like this. I don't like any of this. I did it. I'm done with it. I don't acting is not in my future. But then when I was in college, I was walking across campus and out of nowhere, I think I just looked at the theater building or something, and I just had this immediate download that was like, I want to do acting. Why am I not getting my degree in theater? Those were my thoughts. But at the same time, I was like, those are not my thoughts. They were not, because I knew how much I hated what I went through. So at that moment, I knew God told me to do acting. And I was like, okay, that is what I am to do. And literally from that moment, that same day when I went home, because I knew that God put this in me, I guess he also put in me the thought of what actors go through, because we hear a lot of stories about how actors lose themselves when they get into, fame and all of that. And I was like, man, if this is what is in my future, which I know it is because they just told me, then I don't want to go down that road. And so that same day, I wrote down 4 or 5 things in red ink in a notebook that were like my boundaries that I will not do. And so I'm sure I don't know where that is now, but I know a lot of them are the same. And I'll just kind of read you what mine are. So, and like I said, we're all different. So you are welcome to kind of use some of mine to make yours or completely create your own. They don't have to be the same. But mine are that I won't do swimsuits or nudity. So to me, like a swimsuit, and this is probably just my upbringing, but a swimsuit is so much like a bra and underwear that it's like, yeah, you say it's a bikini, but it really just looks like a bra and underwear. So I won't do like movies or commercials or anything that have that. I also won't put my lips on anyone, and I don't want anybody's lips on me. So, like, if it's a kid, if I'm playing a parent and I kiss a kid on the forehead or something, that's totally fine. But as far as an affectionate type of kissing, I don't like. Even before I was married, I was like, nope, these lips are mine, and like I don't want to be just swapping lips with people. So, I'm not for that. And also, I know some people they have this boundary of like, I won't kiss anybody because I'm married. Like I said, mine was before I was married, but it was like a self-respect thing for me. But others are like, well, to me, it's acting and I don't mind doing it with another dude or whatever. And that's totally fine. My way of thinking of it is, yes, it's acting, but the act of doing it is actually very real. And it's very real for me. It's very real for my husband. It's just a very real act that is happening, even though it's for a pretend reason. So I won't go there. I also won't promote alcohol or cigarettes. Now I worded it like that because I won't promote it. I won't do a commercial for it. But if a character in a film is having a hard life and she's doing drugs or she's smokes cigarettes or she drinks a lot, I'm okay telling that story. Of course, it depends on how the rest of the story. But for me, I just won't promote those things because I just don't think that they're good. So that's one of mine. And then another one that's kind of come to me recently is just how things are changing. So and this is more so for the commercial world, not like film, but I won't promote fast food or big tech or big pharma. And so this is an example of when you don't have your boundaries in place, how you can kind of get caught up in the moment. So I actually did a medical commercial for a drug, and it was very interesting how I got it because I was the reader. So I worked for some casting directors and I was the reader. And so every actor would come in on audition with me, and I just kind of changed my presentation based on what they were telling me. I was just listening and responding. But the people who were in the room creating the commercial loved what I was doing and wanted to hire me. And so they did. I didn't even audition. They just offered me a role, and it was a SAG commercial, not sure. Anyway, and they offered to me, and I'm like, oh, and they even paid to change my hair blonde so that I didn't match the main character or the other main character. But anyway, I didn't have that solidified in my mind that I didn't want to promote big pharma. So I ended up doing it. But now I'm like, I don't hate that I did it, but it was like I should probably know how I feel about that before I get caught up in the moment. So those are mine. What I will say whenever you are creating your boundaries is it's fine, think of it in your head, but my advice is to actually write them down. Why? Because when you are writing something down, you have to put a period on it. You have to finish a thought. And so if you're like, yeah, I don't think I would do nudity. Well, I might, yeah, no, I don't think I'll do it. So you kind of don't have it firmed up. But once you write it down, you're like, I won't do any nudity, or I won't do partial, or like whatever it is for you, just be sure you write it down so it's definitive. And if it's definitive on paper, it's definitive in your mind. So that is like my biggest tip there is just make sure you can write it down and put a period on it. Put a period on your boundaries. So then how do you make them known? And this is a tricky part that I think some actors deal with is telling other people that they have boundaries. And I say that because I was in one of my acting classes, and the girl beside me, I forgot what came up, but I had told her like, yeah, I already told our acting coach I won't do that kind of stuff. And she goes, you can do that? And I was like, yeah, you can do that. Like, you can absolutely, you're an adult. You can tell your acting coach what you will and won't do. But it was just shocking to me that we were that age and she had no idea that she could, you know, put a line in the sand somewhere. And it really actually kind of broke my heart because I'm like, man, what have you been doing that you've not been wanting to be, that you haven't wanted to do all this time? So making them known. So, two acting coaches, the way that I would do this is I would figure out what acting classes I wanted to take. And then I would ask the instructor if I could audit the class. And then if I felt like this is a class I want to take, then I would have a meeting with them and be like, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what your class entails. I enjoyed it. And we would sit down and I would say, just so you know, here, one of my, I think, phrases was, just so you know, I'm not, well, I think I wrote it down. Let me see. Oh yeah. So, I'm not up for scenes that whatever. I'm not up for scenes that are sexual. I'm not up for kissing scenes. I'm not up for scenes that cuss. I'm not up for scenes that you could say like that. Or you could say, before I take your class, I just wanted to let you know that I would rather not do scenes that cuss, or I'd rather not do scenes that da da da. And how they respond can tell you whether or not you want to take their class. Because if one of my acting coaches had said, sorry, like you got to be willing to do it all, that's just part of the gig, then I would have been like, okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I'll probably find something else, but I appreciate it. So be willing to walk away if they're not okay with your boundaries. Now, if you want to make them known when you're offered a role, let me move my notes here so I can see everything. There we go. So a lot of times I would audition for a role and then I would get the more of the script back and I'd be like, I don't know if this is something that I actually want to do now that I know more of the story. And so I would usually compliment something that I read. So I'd usually say like, oh, thank you for the offer, or I love this character, or this is such a great story, or something like that. And then I would say, I actually don't do scenes that XYZ. I actually, doing XYZ isn't my cup of tea. Is there any way these parts can be adjusted or something along those lines? And sometimes they would come back and be like, yeah, I think we can work with that. We can probably do this and that and the other. Or they would say, I'm sorry, that's how I wrote it. That's really how I want it to be filmed. We're not willing to change it. And at that point, I'd be like, okay, like no problem. I hope it goes well for you guys, and it would be totally fine. And a lot of times they would respond, even if it was like, no, we're not willing to change it, but they would say, but we hope to work with you on something in the future, because they saw my audition, they liked me enough to give me the role, but then it was just like, we don't mesh on these things, but that doesn't mean we can't work together on something later. So it doesn't always have to be a like butting of the heads when you're sharing your boundaries. Something else I wanted to say on that. Oh yeah, so you you kind of have to be okay with your progress being a little bit slower than your friends who are willing to do anything and everything to move forward. And I can't even tell you how many times I have said no to gigs or auditions. I mean, even just recently, this last year, in the Christian film space, like I said, we're all at different levels and some of us have boundaries that others don't. And I was offered a lead role in a feature film that was so funny with my friends, and I was so excited to film it. And then I read the entire script and I was like, like I'm not cool with kissing the scene partner like this many times, and I'm not cool with this, that, and the other. And I thought that they already knew that about me. So when we had a discussion, it was brand new to them. They had no idea that I wasn't comfortable with that. And I don't like the word comfortable because it's not that I'm uncomfortable. It's just that that's a boundary that I have. So it's not about comfort level. It's just I can make myself comfortable doing it. I don't want to. But it's just a bummer when you have to turn down work, especially when it's something you really, really want to do. But I will tell you that God honors that integrity that you hold, and He can absolutely honor that when you sacrifice something worldly to um, honor whatever it is, whether it's your own, like self-respect or your spouse or just your walk. Like if it's honoring Jesus, like He can use that. So don't be bummed, or maybe don't be deterred from turning down things because you think you won't get anything back. Like God sees it all. So, like I said, there's numerous things that I have turned down, and it's not always fun. But one of my acting coaches told me this, and I so appreciate that she said this. I actually wasn't expecting it from her, but I was telling her before I joined her class that I wasn't willing to do these things and those things. And it was a class where people were willing to make out with people and lay on top of each other and be sexual, like all in the name of art. And so I didn't know how this was going to go over, but I knew she had a great reputation and people loved her. And I thought, I think I need to do her class. So I had a conversation with her and I was just like, hey, I'm just not up for doing these things. Is that okay with you? And she was like, absolutely. And she said, the way I see it is at the end of the day, you're the one who has to look down on your own mountain and be okay with everything you've done. And I was like, wow, you're right. So I ended up taking her class for 2 years, actually, or I think over 2 years, but I will never forget that. You're the one who has to look back down on your own mountain and be okay with everything you've done. And so I say that to you. You will also have to look back down your own mountain when you've gotten to that point of success that you feel like you wanted to achieve, and you're looking back and you're saying, do I regret these things, or am I happy with how my mountain looks and the trail that I took to get here? So, in a couple of future videos, I will share how I have basically lost a gig standing in for Jennifer Garner because of my boundaries, and then how I made my boundaries known on a Ford commercial and how the director responded. So it's always worth it, but stick around for those videos and I'll be bringing you more. Also, let me know what other topics like you're struggling with as an actor, whether you're getting started, you're advanced, like wherever you are in the acting world, leave some comments of ideas that you would like me to discuss in videos. I have a list of things, but I would love to hear what's on your mind as well. So I've got a free acting guide for you if you are just stepping in or if you're kind of new, but you still want to know other tips. Go to personalpowerhouse.com/acting guide, and you can get my 4-page acting guide for free. Just lots of tips and tricks of things that I did, pros and cons, and then extra information that will absolutely help you. So that is it. I'll see you in the next video.